The FIA has made a significant announcement regarding Formula One, saying it will implement measures to address and possibly eliminate the issue of porpoising in the sport. This decision comes after several drivers reported experiencing severe back pain during and after the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton, among others, voiced concerns over this issue, with Esteban Ocon also mentioning that more and more drivers are seeking action. In response, the FIA acknowledged the problem and assured the public that it was taking steps to improve safety and reduce the effects of porpoising in future races. After receiving feedback from doctors and drivers throughout the Azerbaijan weekend, the FIA decided to intervene. The body's aim is to create a safer and more comfortable environment for the drivers while maintaining the competitive nature of the sport. This move, although driven by safety concerns, will have a direct impact on how teams design and set up their cars moving forward. So, what exactly is the FIA planning to do to reduce or eliminate porpoising in Formula One? Ahead of the Canadian Grand Prix weekend, the FIA issued a technical directive outlining their approach. They plan to introduce new guidelines to help teams tackle the issue. For example, they will be closely scrutinizing the undercarriage of the cars, specifically the planks and skids, both in terms of their design and the wear they show after use. This is one of the steps the FIA believes will help minimize the effects of excessive bouncing. In addition, the FIA has proposed the creation of a metric that measures a car's vertical acceleration. This metric will serve as a standard for the acceptable level of vertical oscillation, or bouncing, in a Formula One car. The exact formula for this metric is still under review, and teams are encouraged to collaborate with the FIA to refine it. Once it's established, teams will be expected to adhere to this new standard to ensure the safety and comfort of the drivers during races. The FIA's plan also includes stricter inspections of the car's components, especially the undercarriage, which plays a key role in handling the bouncing issues. Cars from teams like Mercedes and Ferrari, which have been known to struggle with porpoising, will face tighter scrutiny. These teams will no longer be able to set up their cars in ways that result in excessive bouncing, even if those setups tend to be faster. This could lead to a performance shift, as teams might need to adjust their setups to comply with the new regulations. On the other hand, teams like Red Bull, who have not experienced significant issues with porpoising, will not face major changes. They can continue operating their cars without worrying about having to raise their ride height or make other significant adjustments. However, the FIA's changes will impact the entire field, and the competition dynamics could shift, especially as teams with more pronounced bouncing may lose some of their competitive edge due to the new rules. So how can the teams reduce the impact of porpoising while adhering to the new regulations? The simplest solution is to raise the car's ride height. By doing this, the car is lifted off the ground, preventing it from getting too close to the track surface due to downforce. While this adjustment can help alleviate bouncing, it comes at a cost. Increased ride height reduces the car's ground effect, which in turn means less downforce, lower grip, and slower lap times. As a result, teams have been lowering their cars to the ground as much as possible to gain more downforce and better performance. But now, with the FIA's inspection of undercarriage components, those same teams may have to make sacrifices in order to comply with the new rules. For Ferrari, Mercedes, and other teams facing significant bouncing issues, this could mean reduced performance, while teams like Red Bull may maintain their advantage. The exact details of how the FIA will enforce these changes remain unclear, but it's certain that the upcoming race weekends will see new strategies unfold. The FIA has made it clear that these new anti-porpoising measures will be enforced at the Canadian Grand Prix, with teams expected to comply immediately. Any team failing to meet these standards risks being disqualified from the race. The FIA's intention is to implement these changes swiftly to improve driver safety, but the immediate impact could be significant for certain teams. For example, Mercedes and Ferrari, who have struggled the most with porpoising, may need to make major adjustments to their setups. In fact, the FIA has stated that some temporary exceptions will be made for this race weekend. Due to the short timeline, teams will be allowed to install additional reinforcements on the floor of their cars, or make other modifications that may not fully comply with the standard regulations. These adjustments will be overlooked for the time being, but only for the Canadian Grand Prix. After that, teams will be required to follow the new rules strictly. While the short-term exceptions may help teams like Mercedes and Ferrari mitigate the bouncing issues for the Canadian Grand Prix, the long-term impact of the new rules could reshape the competitive landscape. If the new measures prove effective, they will likely be adopted for future races, meaning teams may need to rethink their car setups entirely. In the longer run, teams such as Mercedes and Ferrari might find themselves facing more challenges, especially if the bouncing issues persist and force them to compromise on performance. For now, Mercedes and Ferrari will likely take advantage of the temporary measures allowed for the weekend, possibly making some adjustments that would typically be considered illegal. These adjustments could help them minimize the effects of porpoising and regain some of the performance they've lost due to excessive bouncing. But if the rules work as intended, other teams could benefit in the long term, potentially leveling the playing field and reducing the gap between the frontrunners and those struggling with porpoising. Looking ahead, the implementation of these rules may hurt teams like Ferrari and Mercedes the most, as they have been the most affected by porpoising. In contrast, teams like Red Bull, who have not faced major bouncing issues, will likely continue to perform well without having to make significant adjustments to their cars. Other teams, such as McLaren and Alpine, have also experienced less porpoising, which could allow them to make gains as well. Mercedes, however, might benefit from these changes on a driver level. Despite the challenges faced during the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, where Lewis Hamilton suffered from back pain, the team is confident that their situation will improve in Montreal. James Vowles, Mercedes Motorsport Strategy Director, acknowledged that the team's setup in Baku had pushed their package together and their drivers too far. The adjustments required for Montreal could bring Mercedes closer to the top contenders, reducing the gap they experienced in the previous races. Mercedes' confidence heading into the Canadian Grand Prix stems from the lessons learned in Baku. The team had been caught off guard by the severe impact of their setup, which led to discomfort for their drivers, particularly Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton, who had been vocal about the back pain he experienced, pushed through it to finish in a respectable fourth position. This was a testament to his resilience, but it also highlighted the risks of pushing the car and the drivers too hard in pursuit of performance. The team's focus now is on refining their setup for Montreal. While they may not yet be at the front of the pack in terms of pure performance, they aim to close the gap. With the new anti-porpoising measures in place, they hope to achieve better stability and consistency, which could help them challenge Red Bull and Ferrari in the upcoming races. However, it's clear that the real test will be in how the team adapts to the new regulations and whether they can find the right balance between performance and driver safety. As for the rest of the teams, the changes could have a profound impact on their strategy as well. Red Bull, for example, is less affected by porpoising, which gives them a significant advantage heading into the Canadian Grand Prix. Their car setup is already well suited to handle the current conditions, and they won't face the same setbacks that Mercedes and Ferrari are likely to encounter. This could further cement their position at the front of the grid, making it even more challenging for their competitors to catch up. The new rules will also likely affect the team's ability to develop and improve their cars over the coming races. With the introduction of stricter regulations on ride height, aerodynamic adjustments, and undercar components, the teams will need to be more strategic in their approach to car development. Teams that are struggling with porpoising, like Mercedes and Ferrari, will have to balance between solving the bouncing issue and maintaining the performance edge they're used to. For Red Bull and other teams less affected by porpoising, this will be less of a concern, allowing them to focus on other areas of car development. As the Canadian Grand Prix weekend approaches, the focus shifts to how teams will implement the new measures. For Mercedes and Ferrari, it's a race against time to adjust their cars in a way that minimizes porpoising while also preserving performance. These teams are facing a difficult balancing act. On the one hand, they need to make sure their cars are set up correctly to avoid disqualification. On the other, they must not sacrifice too much speed in the process. In contrast, Red Bull seems to be in a stronger position. Their car has not been significantly affected by porpoising, which means they don't have to make drastic changes. This gives them a distinct advantage, allowing them to focus on fine-tuning their setup for the specific demands of the Canadian circuit. With their consistent strong performance, Red Bull could further extend their lead, especially if Mercedes and Ferrari struggle to implement the changes effectively. Looking ahead, the impact of these new rules could have lasting effects on the dynamics of the 2024 Formula One season. While teams like Red Bull may gain even more of an advantage, others, such as Mercedes and Ferrari, will be forced to adapt quickly to the new challenges presented by the anti-porpoising measures. The short-term benefits for Mercedes and Ferrari may be limited, but if they can find a way to balance performance with compliance, they might find themselves in a better position as the season progresses. Ultimately, the FIA's intervention is aimed at ensuring driver safety while maintaining competitive fairness. As the season unfolds, it will be fascinating to see which teams can master the art of balancing performance and safety under the new regulations. The race for the championship is far from decided, but the impact of these changes is sure to shake up the standings in ways we can't yet predict.